It's 3:17 a.m., and the silence is so thick it presses against your skin like wet wool. Outside, the wind scrapes the branches against the window in slow, deliberate strokes, as if nature itself is trying to wake you up. But you're already awake, wide-eyed, heart hammering beneath your ribs, staring at a ceiling that might as well be the bottom of the ocean. There's no reason for this. You had a good day today, a decent dinner, a few laughs. No tragedy, no crisis. And yet here you are, trapped inside a mind that feels like a stranger's house after midnight, familiar enough to unsettle, foreign enough to terrify. This isn't sadness. That would be too simple. This is something else entirely. Something deeper. A hollow ache that spreads from your chest into your limbs, not loud or dramatic, but persistent, like a low hum beneath everything you do. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And sometimes, when you're alone with it long enough, it asks questions you can't answer. What if none of it matters? Not just life, though that thought lingers, but the job, the relationships, the dreams, the goals. What if all of it is just noise, covering up an unbearable truth? That maybe, just maybe, you were never supposed to feel okay? We call this depression. We label it. We categorize it. We put it under fluorescent lights and dissect it with clinical language. But what if we've been asking the wrong questions all along? What if depression isn't an illness to be cured, but a message we've refused to hear? Think about that. Imagine that this crushing weight isn't broken wiring or chemical imbalance alone, but a signal. A desperate SOS from somewhere deep inside you, trying to tell you something vital. Something you've spent years numbing, avoiding, medicating, or outrunning. Why does it come back again and again, even when life looks fine on paper? Why do some of the most successful, intelligent, seemingly, together, people suffer the most? And why, when we try to fix it with positivity, productivity, or distraction, does it only seem to grow stronger? Maybe because we've misunderstood its purpose. Because buried beneath the numbness, beneath the despair, there is something ancient and wise. Something that has been trying to speak to us through the darkness. And we've been too afraid, or too busy, to listen. What if the very thing we fear most, this descent into nothingness, is actually the beginning of knowing ourselves? What if the pain is not the problem, but the doorway? You close your eyes, hoping sleep will erase the thoughts. But they don't go away. They wait, patient, persistent, because they know something you don't yet. They know you're ready. And soon, whether you want to or not, you'll have to face them. Let's rewind the clock. Not to the moment you woke up at 3:17 a.m., heart pounding, mind unraveling, but further, back to the first time you felt something was off. Maybe it was in high school, when the world suddenly seemed too loud, too bright, too full of expectations you didn't know how to meet. Or maybe it was later, when you had everything you thought you wanted, and still felt like a ghost in your own life. That feeling? It didn't come from nowhere. It was seated long before you understood the word depression. Long before you learned to smile when you didn't feel like it. Long before you were told to be positive, just try harder, or look on the bright side. It was planted in the soil of your psyche by forces far older than modern medicine or self-help gurus. Forces that shape the way you see yourself, the world, and your place in it. Let's talk about Carl Jung. He once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." He wasn't being poetic. He meant that the human mind resists self-awareness because it demands confrontation with the shadow, with the truth, with the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. And when we refuse that confrontation, when we suppress the deeper questions of meaning, purpose, and identity, the psyche doesn't stay silent. It rebels, through dreams, through compulsions, through breakdowns, and yes, through depression. Jung saw depression not as a malfunction, but as a natural, even necessary, part of the individuation process, the journey toward becoming who you truly are. But in a world obsessed with productivity, performance, and positivity, we've pathologized this process. We've turned inner conflict into a medical condition, and in doing so, we've missed the point entirely. Now, let's bring in Nietzsche. He warned us. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. Depression, in its purest form, is not a lack of joy, it's a lack of meaning. It's the soul's refusal to participate in a life that feels hollow, inauthentic, or disconnected from what truly matters. When you stare at the ceiling at 3:17 a.m. asking, "What's the point?" you're not just being dramatic. You're echoing a question that has haunted philosophers, poets, and prophets for millennia. And yet, our culture tells us to ignore it, to medicate it, to think positive, and manifest success. We've built a society that equates happiness with health, and sadness with sickness. But what if we've inverted the truth? Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, believed that life was inherently filled with suffering. That desire leads to dissatisfaction, and satisfaction leads to emptiness. He saw the human condition as a pendulum between pain and boredom. Depression, in this framework, isn't an aberration, it's the natural result of waking up to the absurdity of existence without a deeper. And Aldous Huxley? He warned us that we'd medicate ourselves into oblivion. In Brave New World, he didn't predict a dystopia ruled by fear, but one ruled by pleasure. A world where people are pacified by distractions, entertainment, and chemical relief, where we numb ourselves into compliance, avoiding the discomfort of self-confrontation. Does that sound familiar? We live in a culture that sells us escape. From the moment we wake up, we're bombarded with messages telling us how to feel better, look better, be better. We're sold quick fixes, pills, podcasts, productivity hacks, 5-step plans to happiness. But none of it asks the real question: what are you running from? Because here's the truth: depression is not always a disorder. Sometimes it's a rebellion. A rebellion against a life that doesn't feel true. A rebellion against a world that demands we perform joy while suppressing sorrow. A rebellion against a system that rewards conformity and punishes introspection. Jean-Paul Sartre, the father of existentialism, believed that we are condemned to be free. That we are responsible for creating our own meaning in a universe that offers none. That freedom is terrifying, because it means we can't blame the world for our emptiness. We can't blame our parents, our past, or our circumstances. We have to face the terrifying possibility that we've chosen, consciously or unconsciously, the life we're living. And when we realize that, when we stare into that abyss of responsibility and meaning, depression can feel like the only honest response. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that those who found purpose, even in the worst conditions, were more likely to survive. He didn't deny suffering, he embraced it. He saw it as a doorway to deeper understanding. So why do we run from it? Because it's easier to numb than to face. Easier to distract than to reflect. Easier to pretend than to feel. But what if the very thing we fear most, the descent into darkness, is the only way out? What if depression isn't the enemy, but the guide? You may not be ready to believe that yet. And that's okay. Because this isn't about belief. It's about understanding. About peeling back the layers of noise and conditioning to see what's been buried beneath. And if you keep going, if you dare to look deeper, you'll start to see the patterns. The lies we've been told. The illusions we've bought into. The false promises of a world that wants you to keep smiling while your soul screams for attention. Because the real problem isn't depression. The real problem is that we've forgotten how to be human. And until we remember, the darkness will keep coming back. Again, and again, and again. Let's talk about the cost. Not the obvious costs. The missed days of work, the strained relationships, the endless cycles of therapy and medication. Those are real, yes, but they're just the surface scars of a deeper wound. The true consequences of our misunderstanding run far beneath that. They live in the silent erosion of meaning, the slow decay of authenticity, the quiet surrender to a life half-lived. We've built an entire world on the assumption that happiness is the default setting of human existence. That if you're not smiling, striving, or consuming with relentless energy, something must be wrong with you. And so we medicate. We distract. We perform joy like actors on a stage, rehearsing lines we never wrote. But what happens when the curtain falls? In the stillness, the truth waits. Depression isn't just a personal crisis, it's a cultural symptom. A reflection of a society that has severed itself from depth, from discomfort, from the raw, unfiltered experience of being alive. We've created a system that rewards productivity over presence, success over self-awareness, and external validation over inner knowing. And in doing so, we've left ourselves defenseless against the very thing that makes us human, our capacity for suffering. Because here's what modern psychology rarely tells you: suffering is not always a malfunction. Sometimes it's a compass, but we've trained ourselves to ignore it, to silence it with serotonin boosters and motivational mantras, to treat every low mood as a problem to be solved rather than a message to be understood. And in this act of suppression, we lose something vital. We lose our ability to listen, to ourselves, to each other, to the quiet wisdom that speaks through pain. This isn't just philosophical musing, it's neurological reality. Neuroscience tells us that depression alters the brain's structure. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought and decision-making, shrinks. The amygdala, responsible for fear and emotional response, becomes hyperactive. Dopamine pathways, once primed for reward and motivation, go dormant. The brain begins to look less like a machine designed for engagement, and more like one built for survival. And that's exactly what it is. Your brain isn't broken. It's protecting you. When your environment feels meaningless, when your identity feels fragmented, when your sense of purpose evaporates into thin air, the mind initiates a kind of internal lockdown. It conserves energy. It dulls sensation. It withdraws from the world, not out of weakness, but out of necessity. It's the same survival mechanism that kicks in during extreme trauma. The body goes numb. The mind detaches. The soul retreats. Only in this case, the trauma isn't a single event. It's a slow unraveling. 1,000 small betrayals of self. A lifetime of pretending to be someone you're not. Of chasing goals that were never yours. Of wearing masks so long, you forget what your face looks like without them. And all the while, the culture around you keeps demanding performance. Be productive. Be happy. Be grateful. Be successful. You scroll through images of people who seem to have everything figured out. Their curated lives flash before you like a movie you'll never star in. You start to believe that maybe, just maybe, there really is something wrong with you. But what if the real sickness isn't inside you? What if it's in the system that taught you to measure your worth by output? That conditioned you to see sadness as failure? That sold you the lie that fulfillment comes from external achievement rather than internal alignment? Cultural conditioning is a powerful force. It shapes the way we interpret our emotions, the way we define health, the way we understand ourselves. And in Western society, we've been taught that feeling bad is a sign of weakness. That struggle is optional. That if you just try hard enough, you can think yourself into happiness. That belief is not only false, it's dangerous. Because when we pathologize normal human experiences, we rob ourselves of the tools needed to navigate them. We stop asking why we feel the way we do. We stop searching for meaning. We stop listening. And when we stop listening, we become deaf to the most important voice of all, the one inside us. This is the unseen consequence of our misunderstanding. We've lost our relationship with darkness. We no longer know how to sit with it, how to learn from it, how to let it shape us instead of break us. We rush to fix it, to escape it, to erase it. And in doing so, we miss the lesson it carries. Every great spiritual tradition acknowledges the necessity of descent. The dark night of the soul, the cave of initiation, the winter of the spirit. These aren't punishments, they're passages. Rituals of transformation that strip away illusion, reveal hidden truths, and forge resilience in the crucible of suffering. But we've forgotten how to honor the descent. Instead, we throw light at it. We flood it with positivity, with affirmations, with forced gratitude. We tell people to snap out of it, as if willpower alone could override the deepest instincts of the human psyche. And when that doesn't work, we blame them. We say they're weak, broken, defective, in need of correction. But what if they're not broken? What if they're simply awake? Awake to the absurdity of a world that demands constant cheerfulness while offering little in return. Awake to the emptiness of a life built on borrowed dreams. Awake to the hollowness of a system that prizes efficiency over empathy, status over substance, image over integrity. Depression, in its purest form, is not a flaw. It is a fracture in the illusion, a crack through which the real self begins to emerge. But we don't want to see that. We don't want to admit that maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't with the person who suffers, but with the world that made them suffer in the first place. And until we do, the cycle continues. People keep falling apart. They keep trying to fix themselves. They keep reaching for solutions that only deepen the disconnection. And all the while, the truth remains hidden in plain sight. You are not the problem. The system is. And until we begin to question that system, until we stop treating depression as an enemy and start seeing it as a teacher, we will never find the healing we so desperately seek. So ask yourself, are you ready to stop running? Are you ready to stop fixing? Are you ready to stop pretending? Because if you are, if you truly are, then something extraordinary awaits. A rebellion, a reckoning, a reawakening. And it starts with a single, terrifying question. What if the darkness is not the end, but the beginning? You've spent years trying to fix yourself. You've read the books, done the therapy, taken the pills, chanted the affirmations. You've followed the advice of experts, influencers, and well-meaning friends. You've tried to manifest happiness, reprogram your mind, and optimize your life. You've built habits, routines, and productivity systems, only to watch them crumble under the weight of something you can't quite name. And still, the darkness returns. Not because you're broken, not because you're weak, but because you've been fighting the wrong battle. Because all this time, you've been trying to escape the very thing that could set you free. What if, instead of fixing yourself, you reclaimed yourself? What if, instead of silencing the voice inside that whispers, "This isn't real," you leaned in and asked it what it knows? This is the rebellion. Not a dramatic, fist-in-the-air revolution. Not a sudden, miraculous transformation. But a quiet, radical shift in how you relate to your pain. A refusal to keep pretending. A decision to stop running from the truth. Because here's what most people won't tell you. You don't heal by becoming someone new. You heal by becoming who you've always been. And that journey begins with unlearning everything you've been taught about depression. Forget the idea that it's a chemical imbalance to be corrected. Forget the belief that it's a flaw to be fixed. Forget the notion that it's a weakness to be overcome. Instead, try this. See it as a mirror. See it as a messenger. See it as the part of you that refuses to live a lie. This is not about romanticizing suffering. Pain is not inherently noble. Despair is not a virtue. But neither are they meaningless. They are signals, warnings, invitations. And if you dare to listen, they will show you the way out. Let's talk about Viktor Frankl again. In Man's Search for Meaning, he describes how those who found purpose, even in the horror of a concentration camp, were more likely to survive. He didn't suggest that suffering was good. He suggested that meaning could make it bearable. But here's the thing most people miss. Meaning doesn't come from success. It doesn't come from happiness. It doesn't come from external validation or material gain. It comes from alignment, from living in accordance with who you truly are. And that is a terrifying realization. Because it means that if your life feels empty, it's not because you're defective. It's because something in your life is misaligned. And the only way to fix that is not by forcing yourself to smile through the pain, but by asking the hard questions. What am I sacrificing to fit into this life? Who am I pretending to be? What am I afraid to feel? What part of me have I buried to survive? These are not easy questions. They are not the kind you answer once and move on. They are the kind that follow you, that haunt you, that demand you to change. And that is where the rebellion begins. You stop trying to fix the symptoms. You stop numbing the pain. You stop blaming yourself. And you start asking the real question. What is my depression trying to show me? This is not a passive process. It's not about sitting in a cave and waiting for enlightenment to strike. It's about action. Radical, uncomfortable, inconvenient action. It's about carving space in your life to feel, to sit with the silence, to let the questions burn, to stop running from the discomfort that has been trying to teach you something all along. And it's about rejecting the lie that you must always be okay. Because you don't have to be okay. You have to be honest. You have to be real. You have to be willing to dismantle the illusion that your worth is tied to your productivity, your happiness, or your ability to pretend everything is fine. Let's look at history. Every great transformation began with a crisis. Jesus in the desert. The Buddha under the Bodhi tree. Nietzsche's descent into madness. Rumi's grief-fueled awakening. These were not moments of clarity that came from forcing joy or suppressing pain. They were moments of surrender, of falling apart. And from that collapse, something new emerged. A vision, a truth, a way forward. This is not a call to suffering. It's a call to meaning. To stop seeing depression as an enemy, and start seeing it for what it often is, a threshold, a doorway. A place where the false self begins to die so the real self can be born. And if you're standing at that threshold, if you've been standing there for years, afraid to step through, you are not alone. You are in the company of prophets, philosophers, poets, and every human being who has ever dared to ask, "Is this all there is?" And the answer? No, there is more. But you won't find it by escaping the darkness. You'll find it by walking through it, by letting it change you, by allowing it to strip away the illusions, the masks, the borrowed dreams. And when you finally emerge, you won't be the same. You won't be fixed. You'll be free. And that is the beginning of everything. You've spent your whole life searching for the answer. You've read the self-help books, sat through the therapy sessions, swallowed the pills, chanted the affirmations. You've tried every trick in the book to make the pain go away, to silence the voice that whispers, "This isn't real." But what if the answer isn't something you find? What if the answer is something you become? Because here's the truth they never told you. Depression doesn't exist to be cured. It exists to be understood. And not just intellectually. Not just with logic or science or clever words. But with the raw, unfiltered honesty of a soul that has stopped running from itself. You see, the real reason your pain keeps coming back, no matter how many tools you try, how many habits you build, how many strategies you follow, is not because you're broken. It's because you're awake. Not in the New Age, crystal healing kind of way, but in the ancient, terrifying, soul-shaking way. You are awake to the hollowness of a world that tells you to smile, while your heart is screaming. Awake to the emptiness of a life built on borrowed dreams. Awake to the absurdity of a system that measures your worth by how much you produce, not by how deeply you feel. And that awakening hurts. Because awakening always does. Because once you see the illusion, you can never unsee it. You can try to go back. You can numb. You can distract. You can chase success, status, love, validation, anything to make the ache go away. But the ache doesn't go away. Because it's not meant to. It's meant to guide you. To lead you deeper. To push you past the surface of your life and into the depths where the real self lives. And here's the final, most powerful realization. You are not meant to escape the darkness. You are meant to become it. Not in the way the world fears. Where you collapse into despair. Where you give up. Where you surrender to the void. No. You become the darkness in the way a sculptor becomes the stone. You stop resisting it. You stop fearing it. You stop trying to fix it. And instead, you let it shape you. You let it carve away the false self, the mask you wear, the roles you play, the stories you tell yourself to survive. And when it's done, when the darkness has stripped you bare, that's when you find it. Not happiness, not peace, not certainty, but something far more powerful. Clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about why you're here. And that clarity is not soft or gentle. It's sharp. It cuts through illusion. It burns away pretense. It leaves you raw, exposed, and utterly free. Because freedom doesn't come from being happy all the time. Freedom comes from knowing yourself so deeply that no amount of pain can shake you. From knowing that your worth is not tied to your productivity, your mood, or your ability to pretend everything is fine. From knowing that the darkness inside you is not your enemy. It is your ally. It is the part of you that refuses to live a lie. It is the part of you that demands truth, even when truth hurts. It is the part of you that will not let you settle for less than what you are meant to become. And that is not weakness. That is the fiercest kind of strength. So now, standing at the edge of everything you thought you knew, ask yourself, will you keep running? Will you keep pretending? Will you keep trying to fix yourself, as if you were ever broken? Or will you finally stop? Will you finally turn around? Will you finally look into the darkness and see what it has been trying to show you all along? Because the truth is this. You were never meant to be happy all the time. You were meant to be whole. And the only way to become whole is to stop hiding from the parts of yourself that hurt. So don't run. Don't numb. Don't distract. Sit. Feel. Listen. And when the voice inside you finally speaks, don't silence it. Answer it. Because that voice? It's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to set you free. And once you understand that, once you truly understand that, everything changes. Not because the pain disappears, but because you no longer need it to. Because now you know, the darkness is not the end. It is the beginning. And the journey is yours to take.